Awesome. And let's go. Great. All right. Thanks, Akshay, and thanks, Sandeep, for having me over to speak at your meetup. As Akshay said, I'm Peter. I happen to have created this particular test automation tool called Karate, which I think some of you have heard about already. In terms of background, I work for a company called Intuit. I'm actually based out of Bangalore, India. So it is quite late. It's actually 10:30 p.m., but that's fine. It's all for a good cause. And Karate was created 4 years ago. And as I would quickly talk through, I'll try to give you some sense of what it's good at, and also give you a sense to start off with as to how it's been adopted. It's quite popular. There's a lot of people using it. I see a lot of job listings actually starting to mention Karate, which is a good sign. And my background, I happen to be a very old-time Java programmer. I have tried to do open source in the past. Not many projects. I mean, none of them were as successful as Karate, to be very honest. So this has finally clicked for me after a long period of time. But I think all my experience and diverse experiences have all paid off now. Karate is doing really well. And a couple of call outs before I get into the main part of the presentation and uh, the code samples. And I'm going to try and do demos, so you can hang on for that. And very quickly, yeah, I'll be happy to take questions. I'm sure you're gonna put the questions into chat, or maybe talk through it. I don't know how it's done. Akshay, do you want to talk quickly
Yeah,
about how
yeah,
questions?
like it's depend upon the time. I already mentioned that they can post their question, and if someone want to ask the question, they can just unmute and ask the question directly. I'm open
Awesome.
to it. Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to do one thing. I think we have almost 45 minutes left, right? So I'm actually going to finish in 30 minutes. So we're going to get at least 15 minutes for questions. I'm going to try my best to make it that way, because I think that's where the fun is. And I'm sure all of you have questions with a lot of experience and all that. A DSL here stands for the term domain specific language. I'll talk about that in a minute. And this is very important. The last bullet point on the slide. A lot of you I know have heard of Cucumber or worked on behavior driven development scenarios. I just want to make sure that this is clear that Karate is not a BDD framework. It looks suspiciously like BDD, but it is not. And this is very important because if you expect that Karate is going to be something that your what do you say, product owners or domain users can read like plain English, that's not the case. Think of Karate as a very specific, focused programming language for test automation. Okay. And with that, last year, call out on the slide is that Karate, in case you didn't know, surprisingly, perhaps, has all these 4 capabilities, which is API testing, test doubles. I heard someone talk about contract testing. That's where the test doubles comes in. It can do performance testing, which is really, really cool. And last but not the least, UI automation. So if you're wondering, hey, can Karate actually compete with things like Selenium, Cypress, and all that? The answer is actually yes. Of course, I'm totally biased, so I'm going to ask you all to be the judge here. Okay. And let's see. I talked about Karate being popular, and I just wanted to put up this data point, which is ThoughtWorks, which I respect a lot in the field of actually evaluating and keeping track of open source and of course not so open source projects. They have actually found Karate. I presume it's because a lot of their clients are using it and they've seen traction in the field and all that. But we've appeared in the ThoughtWorks Tech Radar 2 times, and we are slowly moving towards the center of that bullseye over there. So hopefully the next time they release their bulletin, which is every quarter, we will be considered a must adopt or something like that. With that code sample, let me kind of minimize. It's really hard with. Okay, yeah, Zoom gets in the way. This is a hello world sample, and a few things I want to make sure you take away from the slide is that number one, Karate, and apologies if in case you've seen this, some of you may have already been through some parts of this presentation, but as I said, we'll have enough time for Q&A, but for the benefit of those who are completely new to Karate, if you look at this code sample, Karate is not any of the languages that you might be used to, like Java. It's not Java, it's not .NET, it's not Python, it's not JavaScript, it's not Ruby. It's something very weird and alien in a sense. And those of you who have used Cucumber would immediately spot that on the leftmost side of the screen, you see given, when, then, and. Those are the keywords. But I just want to repeat my point that I made earlier, that think of those keywords like given, when, then as purely for decoration. It makes the test suite easier to read. I like it. A lot of people like it. But if you don't like it, you can actually put an asterisk or a star symbol in place of those keywords and it will still work. There's no difference. And now let's get into some of the highlights of Karate. And it's designed in a very specific way, and I think it's worked out well. And number one, JSON is native to the syntax. When you talk about API testing, invariably 90% of the time you think of JSON. There are some people who still use SOAP and XML, but if you're using JSON, you are going to be working a lot with JSON. And the cool thing about Karate, as you see here, is that you can express JSON in a very lenient format. You don't need the double quotes, and you don't need quotes around the key, which is name here on the slide. Okay. And this is, in fact, exactly how JavaScript programmers work with JSON on a daily basis. Very simple, elegant. And another thing to call out here is that if you have tried to embed JSON into programming languages like Java or .NET, you would probably resonate with the fact that you will have to do that ugly backslash escaping of all the quotes, which you don't see here. And that's pretty cool. Why do I call Karate a domain-specific language? It's because it expresses the intent of the tester in a very elegant way, in my opinion. I want to call your attention to the second word on each line, and I'll read it out. It's URL, request, method, status, and path, right? And the moment you hear these words, as someone who understands HTTP or REST, it's going to make sense straight away, right? And this is probably the biggest selling point of Karate that I've just built on the screen, which is you can do these assertions. And remember, when you are in the business of testing, that's probably your number one important task, which is to do an assertion or a validation of an expected versus actual value. And you know that JSON can get really horribly complex. You can have nested JSON arrays and objects within arrays and so on. And the cool thing about Karate is that in one line, you can just give it one blob of JSON. It can be complicated. Of course, this is a hello world example, and we can look at complications later. But no matter how deeply nested your JSON is, Karate is going to do what you expect in terms of validating that every single data element is as expected. And there's a twist here. You can see this hash not null. And that is another big selling point of Karate, which is in real life, you know that JSON responses that you get back from your server are going to have these, troublesome values. Like you're going to have UUIDs, you're going to have unpredictable values like timestamps and random values and dates and so on. And the nice thing about Karate, as you see here, is that you can say, hash something, in this case, not null. And Karate will smartly ignore that value and, look at all the rest. And this, to me, is a big deal. I don't see too many frameworks actually giving you that kind of support, to be honest. And last but not the least, and I remember, someone, I think the point that jumped out in your poll just now was that, how do you chain requests? Karate is really, really good at that. And I think that's one area where Karate actually has an edge over Postman, of course, in my biased opinion. But if you see this simple test case, even though it's very simple, we made two requests. We're making a post here in line 3 at the top, and we're making a get at the second last line. So we've actually taken the response.id that came back from the first response and plugged it into the next request. And this is something you'll need to do all the time. Invariably, in any complex test suite, you will typically begin by making a call to your OAuth system, getting some auth token, or and then plugging that into all your subsequent requests. And that's true functional testing, right? If you just test one API get at a time and stop, to me, it's of no use. You're just validating schema and you're not doing real testing or real E2A testing. Okay, so with that, and you can start putting in your questions, but I'll do a quick demo. and also call out a few things about karate that you should be aware of. And what you're looking at here is Visual Studio Code. And in case you were wondering, right, do I need to be a hardcore programmer? Do I need to be a Java expert to be able to use karate? And the answer is no. Visual Studio Code, we have this free plugin, by the way. We have karate support. And let me show you, karate runner. There is a plugin, it's reaching 10,000 downloads, which is pretty cool. But I haven't met Kirk, who's the author of this plugin, but that's the magic and beauty of open source, that once we have this contribution that's coming from the community, and I'll demonstrate how it works in practice. What you're looking at is a simple test. We are going to make a request to this URL, pass a parameter, query string parameter. We are going to pass this JSON, and we actually going to do a somewhat complicated assertion that the response contains this key and that JSON object under that key. And because of the nice Visual Studio Code support, you can see karate run and debug helpful little menu items sticking out at the top of your test scenarios and test features and all that. And I'm going to click run here. You can see at the bottom, we're actually making a request. We're making a request to the internet. We got something back. And if you go to the karate tab, you can actually see the report. And one of the nice things about Karate's report, and yes, Karate has very comprehensive HTML reports, again, which differentiates it from some of the competition like Rest Assured, for example. And you can see that Karate has a very nice thing it does for you is that it embeds the request and response in the HTML report, which is really, really useful for troubleshooting. Right? And if you're wondering about what happens when a test fails, let me do that as well. Rerun this test. It's going to fail. And Karate is, I just need to reload this page. We have an error, and Karate has come a long way. Certainly, this wasn't that great in the early days of Karate, but I'm happy to say that when you have a very complex payload, Karate makes it really easy, tries its best to make it easy for you to narrow down exactly which key at which depth of this, potentially very complex JSON tree had a mismatch. So that was my quick demo. So your takeaways are, you don't need Java or IDE. You don't need to compile code. This is plain text. Karate is available as a standalone jar or a zip file, which you just download. Your only prerequisite is, the JRE and not the JDK, the Java runtime, which should be there on most machines, but it's very simple. It's like a one-click install to install it. All right, with that, let me get back to the presentation. And I just want to talk through the performance testing aspect of Karate. And now, haven't you always wondered, right? Whenever you have to do performance testing, that you're happily, nearing your production date, and then someone comes running to you and says, "Hey, we need to do perf testing and load testing and all that, and we haven't done it yet. So what do we do?" And keep in mind that you might already have this nice, lovely set of regression test suites, functional test suites that are written in whatever Karate, Rest Assured or Postman or whatever. Now, haven't you always seen the situation play out where you need to call in the SWAT team, some other team that has specialists in JMeter, Gatling, or Locust, or whatnot, and then you need to rewrite all the scenarios that you already have, and then run another tool, do another bunch of reports, and then only you could sign off saying that you've done performance testing. And haven't you always wondered that, can't I reuse all my existing flows and just convert them magically into performance tests? And that's what Karate gives you. So your existing feature files, which are Karate test scripts, you can just add a load model, and then Karate would use Gatling behind the scenes and then run a full-fledged performance test. In fact, I can show you a demo of what this looks like. And I'm not going to, I can do a demo if time permits, but keep in mind that I talked about karate mocks, and this demo that I'm going to show you is actually going to use karate mocks as the dummy service that you're trying to execute or apply load on, which is actually pretty cool. So this is, another way of saying what I just said is that if I remove my network card, which I won't do because you're going to be dropping the Zoom connection. If I remove my network card, this demo would actually still run. It's all going to run on localhost. Karate is doing tests, Karate is doing a performance test, and Karate is actually simulating some REST endpoints. All that is happening on one machine. And the simulation of REST endpoints is Karate mocking, right? In fact, if I show you the mock, I'm going to show you the mock for a reason, because it's something that you're going to see happen in the test results. I'm actually saying for the delete method that I'm going to make as part of this performance test suite, I want to see a delay of 850 milliseconds. So keep that in mind. And CAT's karate simulation. And this is actually, if you know Gatling, you know that Gatling is an excellent tool, and you're going to see the reports in a minute. But one of the barriers to using Gatling is that you need to be a Scala expert. And the good thing about karate is that karate just asks you to do the bare minimum Gatling, where the only thing you practically need to do is this at the bottom of the screen, which is how many users you want to multiply by, what are the ramp up times and all that. And the other very important thing to call out on this feature is that in this load profile is that I'm just making links. I'm just reusing feature files. If you look at cat's create.feature over here, that happens to be a plain old karate test, right? By the way, that test has deliberately got an error simulated, because I'm going to show you how an error looks like when it's part of a performance test. So with all that done, let me just say Maven tests and run this whole suite. And a couple of other things to call out while this runs is that in a very cool way, karate is actually able to, if you get into advanced karate, you can actually invoke Java code from a karate test. Karate is very, very good at gluing Java into your suites. So you can actually use Gatling for performance testing pretty much anything, right? When a Gatling test completes, you get this very, very awesome report. Obviously, experts have worked for a long time and put their heart and soul into these reports. And I want to show you that if you look at the delete cats API, that alone has around 800 milliseconds showing up as the delay, the latency, or whatever. And you get your beautiful report, and you can see that I had some 2 errors simulated. I showed you one of them where there was a typo in one of the expected results JSONs, and you see the tight integration that we have managed to achieve between karate and Gatling is that in the Gatling report, you actually see the line number of the karate test that failed. Yeah, and Gatling reports are simply awesome. So, you should check this out. So one of the reasons why you should choose karate, obviously, as opposed to all the other tools that you saw at the start of this presentation in the poll, is this, right? I don't think any other open source tool, at least, has this ability to reuse tests as performance tests and give you this kind of, it's a huge time saver. Remember I talked about Java interop, and you can look at the slide and see what's happening here. Number one, the takeaway is that I'm sure a lot of you have questions on data-driven testing. That's a big deal. That's really something you expect in any framework, and you expect to use a lot when you're doing really complicated testing, especially when you have a lot of data, which is the case for API testing, because APIs are actually raw data, right? JSON is raw data. The interesting thing about the slide is that I'm actually demonstrating that using karate, you can actually do unit testing of plain old Java code. This is not an API test, okay? I'm actually loading a class called FizzBus directly off the class path. And the first line on the slide is very interesting. That's all you need to do to actually integrate karate with Java code. And there's a lot of engineering behind the scenes to make this happen. And the short answer is that we actually use a JavaScript engine, which is part of the JDK. If you've heard of Graal, which is one of the newer technologies that's coming out of Oracle, that's what we use as a JavaScript engine. And because of that JavaScript engine, we can actually do this crazy thing there without compiling any code. You can actually at runtime load a Java class and then call methods on it like process. Okay. Um, and what you're seeing here is that is how Karate glues Java into a test, right? I make this point because some of you have this question probably, that those of you who have used Cucumber or BDD, right? You would have worked a lot with step definitions and all that glue code, and Karate does not have that. All the API testing that you saw until now, it looks like Cucumber, but there is absolutely no Java or step definitions that you need to write. That said, if you had some Java logic, which is very specific to your organization, or maybe you have some custom protocol, this at the first line of the slide is how you can hook that code that you already have into a Karate test and then make use of it and just call it and get the goodness of matching and uh, data-driven testing. Like you see, by the way, the what you see on the right-hand side is the HTML report that you get after executing this test, where even the title, because of this $val that you see over here, that actually reflects very nicely and very readably in the HTML report. And the last point I want to make on the slide, and the reason I'm spending so much time on the slide is that when you first saw Karate, maybe you thought, what, this is just this yet another keyword-driven framework that is going to, where I'm going to find some limitations at some point when I want to do some really complex stuff. And my answer to those people is, there are no limits to Karate just because of what you're seeing on the slide. That if you hit some kind of very specific wall, just write some Java code. And if you can do it in Java, you can use it in Karate. It's that simple. So just wanted to call that out. So if you have the question that you had something specific, maybe you have some database query, or maybe you have some protocol like gRPC or some weird remoting protocol that maybe only your organization uses, and you want to orchestrate that as part of a Karate test, you have some very interesting options if you go down this route. So with that, I've actually ended ahead of time, which is pretty awesome. So we have a lot of time for questions, right? I'm sure you have a lot, but I want to leave you with this slide, right? Karate, surprisingly, right? You may have gotten into this talk expecting it to be just an API testing tool. It's not. And you can see, I talked about API testing. I talked about test doubles and performance testing. I'll not talk about desktop app automation, but I want to call that out because if you or your friends have a need to do test automation of Windows applications, please send them all this information. Please let them know, because this is an area which I personally feel there is a severe lack of open source good solutions. So Karate is there. I can't do a demo because I don't have a Windows VM set up today, but Karate can do Windows desktop automation, which is a pretty cool thing. So obviously the thing that I haven't done a demo of, which I will do before I end actually, and I forgot that I have to do this demo of web browser automation. So let me do that. Using this. And I want to call out another feature of Karate, which is, again, and always take what I say with a pinch of salt. I am the founder, as Akshay said, of this Karate project, and I'm terribly biased. But what I'm going to show you now is a UI automation test. This is a web browser automation test. I will talk through what it's going to do. It's actually going to go to github.com, attempt to log in with a username and login that does not exist. It's going to throw an error on the UI, and I'm going to actually check that that error message appears as expected. Then we're going to go to Google. We're going to type Karate DSL in the search box. We are going to hit enter or click that button. And we're just going to validate that we landed on the Karate GitHub homepage. Pretty simple. So when I run this, you're going to see Chrome come up on my machine, and the usual stuff that I'm sure all of you have seen many, many times. That's interesting. Why on earth did that totally bomb? Okay. Looks like GitHub changed something and we found a bug in GitHub, but I'm going to just skip that and move on just for the sake of this demo. Oh, yeah. GitHub doesn't like me because I think I've been running this demo too many times. It went too fast, but what GitHub said was, is that we've detected that your IP is making too many suspicious requests to this, so we're going to block you. So let's just ignore that. And what I want to do now is to rerun this test, but in debug mode. And you can see this red dot, which I will move to here. And run this test. And those of you who know what's going to happen, yeah, the red dot means it's a breakpoint. And I'm actually going to say, make the test stop at that point. So same thing over again, it's going to run, execute something, and bang, we've actually stopped at a breakpoint. The situation now is very cool because you have the browser kind of frozen there. Yes, and I wanted to show you something pretty cool. By the way, because the browser is frozen, you can actually do all the things that you want to do as a web automation developer, which is, look at the DOM and use your browser developer tools and all that. Pay attention to the bottom of the screen where I'm going to type highlight login field. And now it should highlight something on the right of the page. So I'm interacting with the page in real time. It's kind of a live session that I've established. So that works. I can, of course, even, if I want to input things into the page, or let me try to do that. Hello, of course, I can clear this first if needed. And I can type in, so you can see what's happening, right? This is a great way for you to troubleshoot tests, and I'll get to some more interesting stuff in a moment. But being able to stop a test and do all this interactive stuff is really, really, what do you say? It's useful when you have to do this all day. And believe me, UI automation probably is one of the hardest things in the world, and I know what I'm talking about. So with that rant over, I'm going to show you another thing which is very unique to karate. If I hit this button, I'm actually going to go back. I can replay a step. And I'm going to do something really crazy now, which is edit the test on the fly. And remember, I haven't restarted this whole thing. So I'm going to say dummy. I want to type dummy into the username. And then if I hit this button here, which is green, restart, it's actually do a hot reload, and it shows me that it's done that. And if I now play the next line of the test, it's using the edited test. And I know a lot of you are very excited by this, and you should be, because what this means for you as someone who's probably having to maintain a lot of automation. And by the way, this works for API test automation as well as UI automation. This is like a general capability of the Karate combination with the Visual Studio Code editor that you're seeing. But what this means for you is that if you are at the end of this very troublesome test suite and you're trying to fix something at the very end, you can actually make that change and without having to do this trial and error, time wasting business of restarting everything, doing a time consuming login, and then going all the way to the point where you wanted to make a change and then see that it works. Okay, so with that, yeah, I just wanted to finish that demo off and let it play past, and we are done. Awesome. So yeah, and with that UI demo, I think, and the last thing I want to call out on the slide is, a word of caution or a word of advice is that I know a lot of folks, are very enthusiastic about creating test automation frameworks. And there's some evangelists who advise that you should actually create them from scratch. it works for some cases, but I believe that if you really want to do serious test automation, you have to reuse existing frameworks such as Karate. And the point on the slide is that I have personally, invested a lot of time, kind of a side business for 4 years, to be honest, um, trying to integrate all these pieces together in a unified test automation framework, which is Karate. It's not simple. It takes a lot of time. It's not something I advise anyone who is on a project that's got a mandate to do automation and quality control and regression testing. You shouldn't be worried about making these building blocks. These building blocks are now available to you as part of a free and open source project called Karate. So do check it out from that perspective. And of course, if you can contribute, nothing like it. It's an open source project after all. And with that, and yes, this is how you can actually keep up to date with the project. We have Twitter. We are on LinkedIn. So I think that's actually probably I'm expecting a lot of you would prefer to keep in touch with the project that way, so you get to know of new releases and stuff. LinkedIn is quite active, and if you have questions, use Stack Overflow, which is our primary channel for support. And besides me, there's a lot of enthusiastic folks now who would be answering questions. And if you have newbie questions and all, don't worry, post it on Stack Overflow. You should be able to get a response. So with that, yeah, I'm all here for questions, and I think we have at least 20 minutes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We have. I think. Can you stop, Peter, the sharing
Yes.
screen, then we can all on the same screen. So
Yeah, great. Um, I hope in case I need to do a demo while answering a question, I should be able to do that, right? Or is that going to be tough?
yeah, you
It,
you can do that. But thanks first of all, thanks Peter for demo. I have some quite question in the chat. So let me go through that. If someone want to explain their question, I will give a chance to explain by themselves. So first question from Nishant. Would you like to explain by yourself or shall I
Yeah,
give?
so I think it has been answered more or less. So my basically the question was like, is it possible to write down some logic while writing your API test in Karate via any program? So which you answered that yeah, you can. We can write down Java code as we used to write using REST assured. We can write down Java code and that can be easily be compatible with Karate. So yeah.
yeah, that's right, Nishant. And I think specifically, it sounds like you're doing some OAuth kind of thing, signatures
Yeah.
and all that. Absolutely, this is possible. In fact, on the demos, if you go to the Karate homepage, you should be able to find Karate-demos very quickly. Part of the
Okay.
demos includes an OAuth example, which actually uses this technique to do that.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
And then we have a second question from Sandeep.
Yeah, it's about integrating Karate with CI tools like GitLab or Bitbucket pipelines. Are there like some kind of recipes for it available? How easy or difficult it is?
Yeah, Sandeep, great question. And short answer is that if you're on a Java project, okay, that's easy because running Karate is exactly the same as running JUnit, right? In fact, the recommendation is that we have an optional JUnit adapter for Karate. So if you use that, the same way that you're running your existing unit tests, you just run Karate tests. And there are ways in Karate to output either the JUnit XML report format, which is a world standard pretty much. It's like a pseudo standard for CI tools. So most CI tools, I mean, I think all CI tools, if they get that XML format, which is a JUnit format, you're done. You get the reports and all that. And of course, Karate encourages you to use its own report. So we have the HTML report that we showed you earlier. And on top of that, some of you who have worked with Cucumber probably are familiar with the Cucumber reporting, ecosystem of HTML reports. You can use that as well. And there are again CI, for example, on Jenkins, there is a Jenkins plugin that supports that tool, so you can get insights and history and graphs and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. Hopefully that answers your question, Sandeep.
Thanks. Like so on the same line, I have same thing like do you have some samples like how to write a YAML file in GitLab or in Circle CI or Travis CI or do you have a proper image? Something?
Yeah, yes. There's definitely plenty of Stack Overflow questions I can point you to. So short answer to you, Akshay, is that if you do a search on Stack Overflow for Karate and GitHub, or karate and Jenkins, and karate and Travis and karate and whatever. I'm forgetting all the names. You will get the answers.
Yeah, thanks.
So yes, recipes, you should be able to find plenty of examples. I'm pretty confident of that.
Thanks. We have a next question from Andrew. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering if there's a good tutorial for trying out, not just trying out other features, but not just at a very superficial level, but maybe like take you deeper into karate so that you can try some of these features out in depth, and then see if there's any pain points and stuff.
Yes, sure. So I think the good thing, Andrew, about karate's status as of now is after 4 years, I mean, there's a significant amount of adoption. If you do a Google search, you're going to get a whole lot of blog posts and all that. Some of the very good ones we have highlighted on our homepage. So if you go through the Karate README at the top, you're going to find links to something like community, support or community karate in the news kind of stuff. And there are plenty of tutorials at various levels. Some are like beginner, some are advanced. That's the first part of your question. And if you actually go to YouTube, you're going to find plenty of stuff on it. It's like surprised me actually how quickly over the last couple of months that things are started to come out. And there is even a Udemy course. There are actually two, but I recommend one. I think it's called Karate from Zero to Hero. So that is, I can vouch for the quality of that course. So if you are into that, or you're willing to actually spend for a quality Udemy course, you have that option as well. So I wouldn't be worried about whether you're going to find tutorials. There's plenty out there if you know where to look.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Next question we have from Anu.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a single question. Like, is schema validation possible in the karate?
Yeah, sure. Anu, I got a question. And the answer is yes. In fact, that's an area, if you don't mind, Akshay, I'll just quickly switch back to sharing.
Sure.
Probably important. So, and let me, cheat and show you my backup slides a little bit. Yeah, okay. So the first answer to your question, Anup, is that it's very simple. If you, there are libraries that do, what do you say, W3C standard JSON schema validation. There are Java libraries. You can use that. However, that said, Karate has this built-in DSL extension that supports you being able to do schema validations. And by schema validations, it means nothing but each JSON key value pair in your data structure. You should be able to validate whether it's a string, number, maybe you want to do slightly custom formats like, is it a regex and all that? And you can do all those things in Karate. I didn't actually get into that. But the three-part answer to your question. Number one, Karate can allow you to plug in any JSON schema, validator, Java binary or library. So that's option A. I already talked about how you integrate Java. You can integrate Java. The answer number two is what I just showed you as the screen, which is Karate has this interesting way to actually validate JSON and give you the flexibility of what I'm going to show you on the slide, which is besides that not null, which I showed you in the very first Hello World demo, you can actually validate for Boolean, string, number. By the way, JSON has only these three primitive data types, which is awesome, right? To me, that really is a great thing because it's very simple. And I think that, is why JSON and REST has proven to be like the de facto way of, sharing data nowadays. Anyway, you can validate if it's an array, object, UUID, and regex. And I can show you some examples of how you can do these validations. And by the way, you're also going to see some on the slide, some examples of advanced JSON matching. And I really want to stress again, and I'm like a broken record sometimes. And I want to repeat to all of you that when you are doing API testing, being able to do these complex assertions on what comes back from your server is the most important thing. And if your framework cannot support it, you should really think very hard about that. And by the way, there's something called JSON path. which is the star symbol that you see here. And what that star symbol is doing is that it's like a SQL query that you're running on the JSON, and it only extracts some parts of the JSON that you are interested in, because a lot of the time when you're testing a complex response, you really don't care about all the you know subsidiary data, and you only want the core meat of your use case, and you can do that very nicely with Karate. What I've just built, the last line on the slide right now, is a regex example. So that is part of my answer to your question, Anup, which is, this is one way of doing schema-like validations in a very specific focused manner. And interestingly, Karate also supports you to be able to plug in JavaScript functions and reuse them. And, by the way, Karate has this amazing reuse story. One of the differences between Karate and Cucumber, which I love talking about, is that Karate allows you to reuse feature files, which if you go to a BDD purists and say that I want to reuse a feature file, they will actually give you very dirty looks. But Karate bends the rules that way because, again, as I said, Karate is this kind of a programming language for testing APIs and test automation in general. It's not just APIs anymore. So yeah, thanks, Anup, because I think I kind of took your question as an excuse to show you this extra slide, which I think is super relevant to this audience. So hopefully that helped.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. We have quite a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I hope, Anup, it gives you answer of the question or.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We have a next question from Padma.
Yeah, hi. He already answered my question where that it supports with the UI, front-end UI website, and also backend using APIs. Yeah. So my question is like extending the same question. Will it allows with the Angular JS as front-end and backend using Scala? Will it support the Karate testing automation tool?
Yeah. Hang on, I was just thinking. I'm trying to bring up a slide, but Padma, yeah, absolutely, great question. The answer is yes. So even if you have some Angular JS application, for example, that happens to be served by a Scala backend, it doesn't really matter. So by default, Karate doesn't really care about what technologies are going into the backend. It works on just plain HTML. It just looks for DOM IDs and CSS selectors and the usual stuff which you are familiar with. But I know why a lot of teams make a big deal about specific support for Angular, and that's what Protractor did, and Protractor's dead, by the way. So that's another interesting discussion. But what that means, and let me rephrase that, right? What it actually means is that you just want some JavaScript helpers that make it slightly easier for you to get a reference to something that is very Angular specific, right? But that's all it is, right? So when you use Karate for an Angular application, and I haven't tried this, but I know teams that have done this, all you need to do is write a bunch of helpers. And by the way, again, I probably don't have time to actually explain this, but compared to how you do, if you've used Selenium, you probably know the notorious, what's it called, JavaScript executor, right? You have to write this big convoluted bunch of code in order to just, make a JavaScript execution on the DOM. Karate just makes that one line. So, and number one, it makes it just one line. It's very simple. So look for that in the documentation, because I think you like what you see. And the second point I want to add to that is that Karate has this reuse story. I already give you a hint by mentioning JavaScript in my previous answer. Imagine that you had a bunch of reusable JavaScript functions. That's only purpose in a Karate test suite is to make accessing a, what's it called, ng- something in an Angular page easier. It's going to take you 5 minutes to write that, and then after that, your entire test suite can just reuse that function, do exactly what Protractor is doing. Protractor is just, in my mind, again, take it with a pinch of salt, totally biased and all that. It's just glorified helper for making DOM manipulation, or DOM, what do you say, traversal easier. And Karate, since it makes it 100 times, maybe that's an exaggeration, 10 times more simpler. That's all you need. Try it out. Ask questions on Stack Overflow if you have more questions, and we can certainly make Karate better if that's really needed. Hopefully that helps, Padma.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Yeah.
We have a few more questions. One is from Alexei.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, hello. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. So I basically have one small question. Can Karate run some JavaScript commands or like JavaScript functions? Because during test automation on UI, you sometimes need to implement some like events like mouse over on drag and drop things.
Absolutely, Alexei. I think this was, it's like a continuation of the previous answer that I had. And again, if I, so the answer is a short yes. And to repeat, right, Karate actually makes it super easy. And to give you one example, right, suppose you have located a particular button on the page. And you can do that. You already know how to do that either by ID or by using a CSS selector. And Karate has some very interesting additions to, the API that make you easily able to traverse to parent elements or child elements and all that. And now, Alexei, you wanted to maybe do a mouse over or a mouse click on that, what's it called, DOM element. You just, on the same DOM element reference that you got by means of a CSS selector, perhaps you can actually call, you can actually tell Karate on the DOM element that I have right now, please execute this particular JavaScript function. And it's actually not even one line. It's actually just a few characters of code. It's very simple. You will like what you see. So do check it out on the Karate documentation.
Yeah, definitely I will check. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let me go through questions quickly. We have 5 more minutes. There's a question from Sandeep. I can read Sandeep, for UI automation, do you use Selenium?
Great question. The answer is no, we don't. I think we are one of the few projects. There's only 2 others that I can mention. I think WebDriver.io is the other one that do not use the Selenium official, binaries or libraries for adapting code to the, the whole W3C WebDriver wire protocol. We wrote our Selenium, and it in fact shouldn't be called Selenium anymore. It should be called WebDriver because that's now the W3C standard. We wrote the W3C protocol support from scratch. That actually gives us a lot more advantages. Again, I would argue that Karate is a lot less flaky than competitors, but again, I leave it as an exercise to this audience to actually validate whether what I'm saying is true or not. Okay, so that's the answer. It's not. And then, by the way, the demo that I showed you was actually using the Chrome native protocol. If some of you have heard of Chrome Developer Protocol or CDP, we're using that. So we have that, and we even have, and this is the most exciting thing. This is very new. This is slightly experimental, but you must have heard of Playwright, which I am actually betting to be a big deal later. I mean, I think it's probably going to beat Selenium at some point. It's going to take a while to beat Selenium. Selenium is like been there for like too many years. But Playwright, keep an eye on it because they are doing some very interesting things. There's a lot of momentum behind the project. It's supported by Microsoft. The employees of Microsoft pretty much, and I keep tracking the projects, like crazy amount of commits per day and all that. So what I was coming to, I just want to leave it here as an exercise, and I'd love to get contributions from this audience if you have time, that we support Playwright as well. So, besides Selenium, which the question is about, we also support CDP or Chrome Native, which is the same Puppeteer you might have heard of. The same way that Puppeteer talks to Chrome, we support that. And a third option, which is this Playwright protocol, we also support that. So we kind of insulating ourselves if Playwright in the future becomes like a huge thing, and I think it will. Karate is going to be one option for all of you to use for your test automation, and mixing API and all that.
Can I interrupt there just a little? Sorry, and it's regarding. I had a question regarding Playwright, Peter, and it's because we are right now using Playwright as the main library, I will say, to test, and it's so powerful. So I just was wondering how that's worked, that integration. I mean, are you using the last release from Playwright, or how we can integrate that? Because other thing that we are using also is Galdin for performance testing. So I just see an opportunity to use Karate to miss all them.
Got it. Yeah, and I'd be happy to take it offline, or you could contact me through LinkedIn or Twitter. Probably is going to be fast. How does that work? Again, we wrote our own adapter for Playwright. The Playwright protocol is actually not documented. It's so new. It is yet another option to it's yet another attempt by people after WebDriver / Selenium to make a protocol that supports all browsers at the same time. and we kind of reverse engineered it, and it's also a WebSocket protocol similar to CDP. The Chrome protocol. In fact, some of the developers of the Chrome protocol actually moved to Microsoft and they started the Playwright project. So there's a little bit of history there.
Yeah.
So short answer, Sergio, is that we support talking to Playwright using WebSockets and JSON, and that's it. So and then we wrote this Java adapter, so you can use Karate as a Java library to talk to Playwright. We'll probably have some still 10% gap, so full disclosure, it's experimental, but maybe with your support we can actually make it 100%. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you more about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, Sergey. Your question was almost next, so it's already done. One question from Sujit, like, can you explain a little bit compatibility with the gRPC and GraphQL? I think more different.
Yeah, two questions. So gRPC, short answer is the same. I talked about the Java integration, and in fact, if you do a Google search for Karate and gRPC, you're going to find a lot of material, because there's actually someone who actually started a project, another open source project specifically for Karate and gRPC. But you don't need to do that, because in my mind, you just need to do this one-time activity of writing one Java class. That is, all it does is that, talks to your gRPC endpoint and then converts it to JSON, and then Karate can do all the work. The other part of your question is GraphQL. Again, I consider personally super biased answer that Karate is the best option we have for GraphQL testing, because GraphQL is not like standard JSON, right? If you try to use REST assured, for example, for GraphQL, you're going to suffer very badly, because you'll need to write a POJO for every different combination of the response that can come back. Because GraphQL by nature means the responses are highly dynamic. You cannot put the responses into any fixed schema. That's not what GraphQL is. So Karate, because it allows you to work in pure JSON, and by the way, the input that you send to GraphQL is not JSON. That is GraphQL, which looks like JSON, but it is not. It's like plain text. Karate has ways to support that. So the short answer to you, Sujit, is that look at the Karate documentation, do a quick search for either gRPC or GraphQL. You're going to find exactly what I just talked to, and you'll find a lot of links to more material that should get you on your way.
Okay, thanks. And one question from Sonia, is this supported by Docker? I think you already answered that.
Yes, again, do a search on the Karate documentation for Docker. You'll get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Just one question, Akka. One question. Can I ask the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, my question is, so we are using Cucumber BDD. That's for UI and API. So, we are yet to start performance testing. So do you suggest, because Karate, I felt, that performance test would be very, handy when we go for Karate. We are still doing, POC kind of thing, whether we need to go for, same kind of framework. So what do you suggest? Can we go for Karate for performance part? When we have, Cucumber and BDD for UI and API?
Yeah, it's a very hard question to answer without understanding your context, right? Straight away, I will say that I think the UI thing you should rule out. That should be your last priority, because if you think about that, you can't control browsers using Gatling. It just doesn't work that way. Browsers, so just let's take that out of the equation. So now you're left at, can you take your BDD suites and somehow magically mix that into Karate? Maybe, depends a lot, obviously. But for example, if you used a combination of REST assured and Cucumber, there is a good chance that you can actually, remember I just said that Karate should be able to take any Java method that you have and use that. And you never know. But I think where things will go wrong is, again, are you using REST assured for this?
No.
No, it depends a lot on whether whatever you have written as part of your UI tests or browser tests are capable of running multi-threaded, because they aren't. All bets are off. And Karate, again, a lot of work has gone into it to make it thread safe so that you can actually mix it with Gatling and nothing bad happens, right? And it's not easy. Trust me on that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, I think then we have one last question from Deepak. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, so my question was related to the setup and teardown methods in Karate. Do you have something like that? Because if
Absolutely right. If you remember the slide where I showed you where we integrated Java code and did data-driven testing, there was actually at the very top of the file, you had something called background, right? So that is just a simple example where it was going to run before each scenario. There are 3 or 4 levels of this. It's going to, remember, karate has evolved out of, learning from the community and a lot of feedback from Stack Overflow. So we have multiple levels. So background is for each scenario, which is like a test suite or a test method. If you translate that to JUnit, that you have hooks like before each feature, after each feature. And my favorite is that you can actually have a global setup which will fire before any test runs. And this is super important or very tricky to do if you're running multiple threads. So you can very easily do that. And of course, it's up to you. If you run karate from Java, you have full control to do anything before and after. So short answer, is that, yeah, we have multiple levels of hooks, and Deepak, I'm pretty sure that it's going to solve every particular scenario that you can think of.
But is it based on the JUnit thing? So if you combine it with...
Right. You can. Remember, I said one of the ways in which you can use karate is JUnit. However, we have deliberately designed karate's hooks to not depend on JUnit. It has to work within karate, which I think is the right decision, right? Because you may not use JUnit, or we want karate to work in Visual Studio Code. So you can reuse features as hooks. So the answer is yes and no. If you want to use JUnit, it's up to you. You just use normal JUnit hooks and then use karate, as just yet another JUnit method. But by default, the hooks in karate are somewhat specific to karate. And if you're working with karate, that's all you need.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter and Noel, for nice question explanation. I don't see any other further question. And if anyone have, please raise your hand. I have a couple of questions. Maybe I can check you with Peter later. So yeah, that would be useful. Just one thing, are we going to support a WebKit also?
You mean Safari?
Yeah.
Yeah, we already support Safaris. In fact, yeah, I don't have time, but I have this demo
No
where
problem.
I run.
That's the one thing, because currently I'm also playing with the Playwright, and karate is one of the 2 options that we could consider. So just checking, because Cypress is failing at some places. So now the chance, what would be the right way for end-to-end testing? So,
yeah, you should do an evaluation. I know you've been there and you know what to do, but yeah, but let me know if you need, you can certainly reach out to me for questions and specific support. So I'll be happy to do that.
Sure. Okay, so thanks everyone for the nice meetup, and maybe you can share your presentation. If it is shareable, then I can share with everyone, and if not, that's also okay. So
yes, I can send you a PDF dump of it. No
yeah,
worries.
so I can share in the meetup group, and I can edit some video this and try to post on say YouTube, and then everyone can see from, and if they want to go through that.
Awesome, sounds good. Thank you, Akshay and Sandeep, yet again for having me over. It was fun.
Thanks for you having me, and yeah. Okay,
right,
bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Peter. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.